is Lucia Rahili.
Hello, and welcome to McKinsey Live. I'm Lucia Rahili, McKinsey's editorial director, and your host for today's event, Unleashing the Power of Middle Managers. Before we start, quick note on this series of live events. Our goal is to give you a chance to engage with our latest research, and obviously asking questions is a big part of that. So if you are registered for this event, please feel free to use that Q&A bar at the bottom of your live stream to ask whatever's on your mind. We do have quite a large audience here today. It's a big crowd, but we will do our best to answer a selection of your questions either at the end or as we go. Today, middle managers, they have effectively been under a decades-long assault. They're maligned, miscast, beleaguered, burned out. But new research shows that middle managers could actually play a vital role in your organization's health and performance, particularly as we hurdle faster and faster into the future of work. So joining us today to help us understand how to make the most of this untapped managerial potential and what this new model of middle management might look like are McKinsey talent leaders Emily Field and Bryan Hancock. Emily is a partner in our Seattle office, where she works with a wide range of companies on organizational performance, talent, and HR. And Bryan is a partner in our DC office, where he is a global leader of the firm's talent work and serves clients on talent and HR topics just across the gamut of sectors, from retail to banking to oil and gas and more. Most important, Emily and Bryan are also the co-authors with McKinsey alum Bill Schaninger of a new book, Power to the Middle: Why Managers Hold the Keys to the Future of Work, which is fresh out last week from Harvard Business Review Press. Emily and Bryan, welcome to McKinsey Live, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
So, Emily, let's start with you. The term middle manager has at this point almost become sadly synonymous with bureaucracy and bloat. It's a label that many of us privately hope to evade, not only because it's not like the hottest of labels like chef or founder, but also, frankly, because middle managers have become such a go-to target over the years on the chopping block. So for context, why middle managers? And I will say that I asked that as a middle manager myself. I've got senior leaders above me. I've got many direct reports below. So I'm asking that from a place of love, or at least empathy. Why this particular class of talent as the focus for your book?
Yeah, let me start by telling you a story of a CEO named Van, the CEO of a hypergrowth tech company. For this company, the pandemic took a real toll on the performance, right? As soon as it was safe for employees to come back to the office, Van demanded them back. He cited, "I need to see people to believe they're working." Like clockwork, though, employees started leaving, just as one of his prized middle managers said would happen, right? Enter the Great Resignation, which so many of us know. No matter how high Van pushed salaries over market value, people kept leaving. And amidst business challenges, the stock tanked. Targets ensued, right? Cost-cutting measures, and they were spread evenly across the organization. 10% of employees were laid off across each function and business unit. To add insult to injury, Van watched a competitor have the exact opposite outcome: strong retention, great engagement, high performance. What was the difference between Van and this competitor? The competitor, she invested in middle managers. We hear stories like the one of Van so frequently when we're working with organizations. You said it, right? Managers, they're maligned. They've been seen as a cost-cutting opportunity by organizations over the past 30 years. We're paying the price. And that's why Bill, Bryan, and I, management consultants at McKinsey, decided to write this book And let's be honest, we do see the irony, right? Over the last several decades, consulting companies have focused on efficiency, on other forms of shareholder value. They've often encouraged the very perception that middle managers are high cost, low value. But when we spent time really reflecting and studying what makes a company win or fail, innovate, or fall short, fall behind, grow, contract, we kept coming to the same conclusion: managers. And work is fundamentally changing. It's undergoing seismic shifts. And our organizational structures, our historical perspective of the role of a manager, are simply not going to adapt or keep up if we don't change it. We argue that organizations have got to put the power to the middle. Managers are the essential link between the front line and senior leaders. We have to change the reputation. We have to stop saying that managers are viewed as paper pushers, bureaucrats, work makers, role enforcers. We have to reinvent them. Managers at their best, they're coaches, they're connectors, they're navigators, they're talent managers and magnets. And here's the great news. Rethinking the role, it has tremendous upside potential. When we look at it, we see conservatively a 3x total increase in return to shareholder when we focus on the manager. Quite literally, it pays off.
Yeah, that is huge. Emily, let's just spend a minute, perhaps this is self-interested, but help us understand why middle managers have gotten such a bad rap over the years. So what's the genesis of that view on their value and their contributions? And how did that view sort of seep so widely and become so prevalent in the corporate world?
It's so true, right? Let me tell you the story of a clothing store manager. We'll call her Renee. She worked at a fast-growing accessory retail outlet. Managers, like so many of us, she was expected to be on call 24/7. She had incredibly high sales targets, no marketing budget, no recruiting support. When her store associates called in sick or they quit, she tirelessly took on their roles. No one was looking out for her, but she was taking great lengths to take care of her employees, anticipate their every need. She actually quite literally got hurt on the job, right? But nobody was taking care of her. And Renee's not an outlier. She's not a unique story on this one, right? Like you said, managers get this terrible reputation, right? They're mocked, they're neglected, they're eliminated. We have entire movies and TV series that mock middle managers for holding meetings that are futile, sending useless emails, preparing pointless reports. And also, they're often blamed, right? When an employee has a great idea, it's common that people say, well, we could do that, but we can't because of middle management. When something goes wrong, who's the first to be blamed? Middle managers. We call them the permafrost layer. We say they're the clay layer. Nothing can permeate through. And sure, let's be honest. There are a fair number of ineffective and sometimes downright incompetent middle managers. But they should have never been promoted to begin with, right? Or they need to be given the training and the coaching to succeed. Middle managers are best positioned to be continuous coaches, to be inspirers to their employees, not just bosses who complete a pro forma yearly performance review to create a paper trail. They're the ones who can really understand, how do we get the best out of our workers? But that's really hard to do when they're just mired by bureaucracy and administrative tasks. They also have the ability to really transform the workplace, but not when they're being sort of forced to conform to outdated ways of working. And here's the startling reality. Too many managers are not well. 43% of middle managers report being burnt out, more than any other job level. They're the people that are taking care of everyone else, and they themselves are burnt out. They're also not rewarded for their people leadership. I would argue their most important role, and they're certainly not spending enough of their time on it. I want to make a few statements and take a moment to reflect if you or if your boss or your boss's boss believes any of these. The only way for someone at a company to advance is to be promoted out of their current role. The importance of one's job can be measured by how many people report to them. The more senior the role, the more the person in it should be paid and rewarded. Outstanding individual contributors should be rewarded with a promotion to management roles. Anyone who stays in middle management for long enough must not be very good. Even if you try to reject these ideas consciously, they're hard to push away completely. They're woven into the very fabric of the corporate world. But work's changing rapidly, and these assumptions are outdated. They're doing damage. And in our book, we really explore them, and we reject them and call for a completely new model.
Good. So Bryan, Emily teed this up a little bit. In the research, you found that even the managers who are actually functioning at a super high level, who are just true and tremendous assets to their employers, are often, overburdened, like stretched too thin, mired in the dreaded and unnecessary admin. So let's talk now about this new model that Emily teed up and how leaders should rethink that managerial role to actually start to realize the potential you've revealed here in your work. What should leaders be doing differently?
I think one of the things leaders should be doing, and Emily talked about this, is making sure that their managers have time to actually manage their people and actually have time to be spending on the most strategic and important elements of what they're doing. What we found is that managers are spending up to half of their time on administrative work or individual contributor work. And some of this is the legacy of manager self-serve that has, increasingly come up, where some of the support that managers had has now been partially automated, where the other part is on the manager to pull it together. And so that may have worked for some organizations, leading up to the pandemic. But during the pandemic, we know that the people needs spiked. The amount of change in the organization was spiking. So as the needs on the strategic side, the needs on the people leadership side were picking up, those same individual contributor tasks, the same administrative tasks remained, which really put the stress on managers, and we're seeing that in those burnout numbers. So the first thing leaders need to do is think about, how do we redesign the role of our middle managers so they can spend time on the strategic activities and they can spend time leading their people. Other thing, and Emily picked up on this, is we should really treat management as a profession. We should select people who have the potential to be great managers into management. And those who are great individual contributors, we should create a separate pathway for them so they feel rewarded with increased pay, with increased responsibility, while not needing to make the jump into management. One of my favorite examples of this is Waffle House. So Waffle House has 3 levels of grill operator. They have grill, so this is the short order cook. And for those of you who have been to a Waffle House and seen these folks at work, they really are amazing. And you've got the grill operator. And then once you hit a level of proficiency, you can become a master grill operator with higher pay. And then the highest level of grill operator is a very small percentage, is a rock star grill operator. That's their title. Their job title is rock star grill operator, and they are colloquially known as Elvis on the grill. And so it's amazing. But what they've done is they've created a career progression that is based on an individual contributor's recognition of what they're able to do and provide them growth and pay without saying, and now you have to be a store manager, and now you have to be something else. We're letting great individual contributors grow in that individual contributor role. And so while the Waffle House example may not fit in all of our organizations, I'd encourage us to think about, what's the analogy for us, for our great individual contributors, to create pathways for them. At the same time, there's often a temptation to also promote our great middle managers out of middle management and into more senior leadership roles where they are less close to the day-to-day on the ground, leading a team, connecting with constituents. In our book, we tell a story of Marcus, who is a fantastic middle manager, who's given the opportunity to go into more senior leadership. But he looks at the role and he says, hey, as much as I appreciate the meetings, the strategic level, the title, the pay, I like what I'm doing. I like being at the center of the action. Being in the middle is where it's at for me. And is there a way that I can, as a great manager, grow as a manager in pay and responsibility, but without having to now be a corporate officer and do other things? So we explore the story of Marcus and others in the book, and the idea of, can we make management a profession, and can we create sufficient amount of time for our managers to spend time truly managing? So those are the things that, as I think about what leaders should do, some of the near-term steps.
Super helpful. And Bryan, I'm just taking stock of some of these questions from the audience, and there's one here that makes a very good segue to the next slide, and that is on HR. Specifically, changing the role of the middle manager, by definition, has follow-on effects with colleagues across the organization. How involved does HR need to be to ensure these role changes play out successfully?
I think HR is a critical partner in making sure that as we're transitioning managers, coaching them to be successful, engaging them in what the roles of the future should look like, and kind of being a team. And one of the things we explore in the book is, in some organizations, that team works beautifully. And HR sits next to managers, helping them reimagine what the work of their teams are going to look like, help them as managers grow in their role, and help think through what's next for them and for the organization. But in too many organizations, we see this tension that sometimes arises, where managers assume that they can outsource people leadership to HR. Hey, my job is to get the work done, and that sounds like an HR problem or a people problem. I'll outsource it to HR. You often hear that. On the flip side, sometimes you hear HR organizations say, hey, our people don't necessarily care about our people. Our managers don't necessarily, so we're the backstop. So we need to do this. And both of those mindsets can play out in counterproductive ways. So in the book, we highlight a story of somebody who at heart is probably a good middle manager, a manager named John from an ad agency. And somebody on his team, Monica's, not doing well. New hire, not a fit in the role. But John goes above and beyond, provides feedback, provides one-on-one coaching, arranges for trainings in areas that might help Monica, engages more broadly on how Monica is doing. What John didn't do is tell HR he was doing all of that. So when it came time for the performance review at the end of the year and Monica's not meeting expectations, John's ready to talk to Monica about next steps in a very humane way that continues the conversation they've been having of, let's find a better fit for you. And HR then decides it's the time to intervene because they haven't been in on that conversation. So now the HR leaders are assuming John's just this ad agency exec that thinks he can fire anybody. We can't do that. We have to have feedback. And John's like, I've been doing the feedback. We have to provide coaching and plans. Like, I've been doing that. And HR's like, but you haven't been documenting it. And you haven't been doing this. And so I think in cases like that, it just highlights that even when somebody intrinsically is doing a lot of the steps we would want, they need, as a manager, to partner with HR and have it be a two-way dialogue, and not the assumption I've got it under control, not the assumption HR can do it all, but it really needs to be kind of that two-way conversation.
Super helpful. Bryan, we've talked a bit about what leaders should do differently. Now we've covered HR, partnering with HR. What about managers? What do managers themselves need to do differently? And how can we enable these kind of dual upward tracks that you alluded to?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of what managers can do differently, a lot of managers naturally do some of the things that we see as required for great management. They provide clarity and meaning to the work. They said, okay, here are the most important things that we're working on, and here's how it ties to the big why, what we're doing, where it goes. And the truly excellent managers then connect it to the you why. Hey, and let's talk about why you're here at this organization and why this work we're doing ties to your purpose and the broader purpose. They don't micromanage, but they challenge. And so they, are empowering their teams, but also holding them to account for the goals that are most important. They're making those connections within teams and across teams. They're creating an inclusive environment on the team, so that, one thing that we know from our race in the workplace research is that there is a broken rung between the first tier of folks and companies and management layers. And some of the reasons why we see turnover of our more diverse entry-level colleagues is because they don't feel included. Managers play a critical role in inclusion. And then they also need to be empathetic leaders about the whole person. I mean, COVID brought us literally into each other's homes. And, with that came an expectation and a conversation that was more broad. I mean, we're seeing also this, mental health concern, other things that are peaking now, and managers need to be able to have a conversation on the whole person. The challenge is, though, not everybody does that naturally. And so what we're seeing is organizations need to, in addition to selecting managers who have the potential to be great managers, teaching them the skills that are required to be a manager. I mean, one organization, just to highlight what they're doing, is Walmart. 75% of Walmart's managers started as hourly employees. They have Walmart academies that are located across the country that teach the first level of leaders among the hourly population, the first level of those supervisors, some of the core managerial skills, some of the core people leadership skills. And then they've now created manager academies so that for folks that do go into management, actually are working on some of these types of skills. So it's not something that we can assume just happens, but it's something that rather, we need to invest in. And for people in managerial tracks, really investing in, this in an ongoing way.
Mm-hmm. Super helpful. Emily, we have spoken here today about some of the specific strategies to support better middle managers and put them at the sort of heart of the action and really enable them to begin to support their organizations for greatest impact. But circling back to where we started, how do we get out of this cul-de-sac of outdated, stereotypical thinking on middle managers, which is pretty entrenched at this point? How do we shift that mindset?
Absolutely. And that's what we need. We need the shift in the mindset. And I have to tell you, it starts with senior leaders. It starts with at the top. I'll tell you a quick story about a CEO named Fred. Fred is the CEO of a fast-growing food processing company. And he found himself absolutely mired by long to-do lists. He approved every single head count. He reviewed expense reports in a cost-conscious environment. He did that at the expense of focusing on his global strategy. He just kept getting tied up. And again, Fred is not unique. Even at multi-billion-dollar companies, what we see is that the most minor decisions start to bubble up to the top, to the most senior leaders. When they then realize that they're a bottleneck, they try to delegate down again, spread out the decisions, but then they take them back again, certain, like, I know best. It really starts with recognizing that managers are absolutely critical to developing the organization, that people are the most important asset, and managers are by definition in the middle of that all. Everyone reports up to a middle manager, over 90% of the organization. You've got to empower them. But that mindset shift you mentioned, right? It really starts with trust, right? Let me maybe share a few things I hear when I talk to middle managers that I think are just all too common. They hear their leaders say, I need you to synthesize the work below you and then present it to the people above you. What they're hearing is, I don't trust you to make good business decisions. They also hear things like, I need to review every single job description. What they're hearing is, I don't trust you to know what roles your team means, no matter that the roles are totally outside my expertise and squarely in yours. They hear executives who say, I need you to submit a travel form for your flight. They're saying, I don't trust you to be a good steward of our company's resources. How disempowering for middle managers, right? What's more, what are the executives not doing because they're focused on this? And how in the world will middle managers one day put them out of a job if they're not being prepared to do it? Too many leaders hoard power. It's a form of control. They view empowering people as a sign of weakness. And it has got to be, that perspective has to be changed. It's the opposite, empowering as a sign of strength. And it has to start with executives really valuing their managers, treating it as a discipline, a true profession, like Bryan described. It also then frees up executives to focus on the bigger picture, to set the vision, set the direction, which in turn, let's be clear, who makes it happen? It's middle managers.
Super helpful. Thanks, Emily. I am mindful of time. We're closing in, but I do want to try to get in one audience question before we close. We've had many versions of this question, so I'll distill it. And while we chat, folks should feel free to use that QR code that's on screen right now to find out more about Power to the Middle. So the question is on headlines right now, namely that we've seen a lot of media discussion lately, particularly centered on the tech sector, of the value of flattening out organizations. How does this square with your research? Any thoughts on how that might play out? Emily, do you want to take that one for us?
Happy to. Right. So we're hearing organizations say and leaders say, do we even need managers? Right? Can we just cut them wholesale? And I think what's really important, particularly in this cost-conscious environment, is to actually say, let's just not cut whole swaths of people. Let's focus on where's the value coming from in the future? How's the organization making money? Where are we growing? Where are we contracting? And then what's the organization design that's needed to be able to set the organization on a trajectory of growth and success? This, means also not, just saying we're going to create, targets that are absolutely uniform. If growth's not uniform, why would the organization chart? We need to bring that nuance. We need to bring the perspective of how are we making money so that then we can actually say, how do we set up the organization? And importantly, the role of the manager to really drive it.
Super helpful. Okay, that brings us to time, but this has been a fantastic discussion. Emily and Bryan, as always, thank you for joining us today. It was great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
And as always, many thanks to all of you for being together with us in the audience today. For more on Power to the Middle, again, visit our website, McKinsey.com, or you can use the QR codes that you can see now on screen to follow Emily and Bryan on LinkedIn. They will be posting on Power to the Middle and related events. You can also order Power to the Middle at the online bookseller of your choice. And you will be able to find a replay of this and our previous McKinsey Live events at mckinsey.com/live. Stay tuned for details on our next McKinsey Live event, which is coming up at the end of September. And have a great day or evening. See you next time on McKinsey Live. Be well.